Let's talk about the character type options that you have when you're developing in SQL Server. Now understand that as I go through these character types and these various data types, that sometimes the database administrator will create these things, sometimes the developer will, sometimes it's a mix. Again, I've mentioned it before in the course, in our world today it's getting harder and harder to get a standard job description for anybody. So with that in mind, let's talk about the character types that you can use in SQL Server for storing your data in the databases. Now there's two basic character types. There's char, and you'll also see this represented as nchar, and that's the Unicode version of that. I talked about Unicode in a different video called Unicode Basics. If you hadn't seen that, you might want to go take a look at it. And then our other character type is varchar, and that's variable character, and we also have a Unicode version of that in varchar, and that's your two major options. Now let's talk about char just a minute. When I use a char or a straight character type, this is a fixed length non-Unicode data type. Now by fixed length, that means, and the way you'll normally see this and use it, for example, you will type char and put like a 3 in here. Now when you put char 3, it means number one, you can't store any more than 3 characters, and this can be, A to Z, 0 through 9, that sort of thing. Basically alphanumeric integer type data. Now, if I put 3 in, I can only store 3. I can't store 4 characters. But if I only store 1, it will pad the other 3 with spaces, and it's always going to use 4 bytes. So whatever number I put in here, from 1 to 8,000, it's going to use that many bytes for that column for every row, no matter what. And of course, I just mentioned here that it has to be between 1 and 8,000. The storage size is always the size of whatever you put in place of n there. Now, let's talk about varchar, or variable character. This is a variable length non-Unicode data type. Use it just like char, but notice the number that we put in there, again, can be between 1 and 8,000, or we can put the word max, M-A-X, in there. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. This is, just like I've mentioned in the first bullet there, this is a variable length data type. So the storage size in bytes is going to be whatever number I put in place of n there, plus 2 bytes, and the 2 bytes is used for housekeeping. So what's going to happen if I put varchar 20 in place of n, then that means I can store up to 20 characters, and then it's going to reserve 2 more bytes for housekeeping, so that's going to take 22 bytes if I fill it up. Now, one thing that's cool about this is that if, for example, I do a varchar 20 and I put 5 characters in, it will actually trim off those other 15 and it'll only take 7 bytes up in memory for that particular instance. This will kind of help you, give you a little bit of control over the memory being used in each individual row in the column. Now, let's talk about max. In previous versions, we had text, in-text, and those sorts of data types, and this is when we need to store more than 8,000 bytes, because a row in SQL Server, actually a page in the SQL Server memory, you can only store 8,000 characters, actually 8,060. But sometimes, for example, if we're storing photographs or binary data, we need to store more than 8,000 bytes. We can use varchar max, and this will allow us to store up to, notice, really it's 2 gigabytes, 2,147,483,647 bytes, and that is 2 to the 31st power minus 1. Now what's going to happen here with varchar max is SQL Server will automatically store this data out on separate data pages and then just put pointers to them. Now what's cool about this, the varchar max works exactly the same way as the old text and in-text, except you read it just like you read anything else. Now in the old text and in-text world, you had to use read text and write text, and it could be really frustrating to have to try to read and write those things, and Microsoft has cleaned that up tremendously here for you. And again, if you've been using text and in-text, you need to go ahead and start phasing those out. Microsoft's already indicating to us that those things are going away in future versions. So go ahead and try to get off of that drug. Now let's talk about some general usage guidelines. How do I know when to use what particular type? Well, the first general rule is don't use the Unicode types unless you're working on an app that requires either multiple languages or certain non-English languages. And the Oriental languages tend to require Unicode a lot more often than other languages. But anytime you're in a non-English language environment, you just need to verify that you can get everything that you need in those character sets. And you can find information about that out there all over the internet. Now, you should always, obviously, use the smallest data type necessary that will accommodate your largest possible value. And I've always said one of the job descriptions that they never tell you about being a database developer is that of a prophet. You have to see into the future here to know what your largest possible value will be. Good luck with that one. And they don't pay extra for being a prophet, by the way. You want to use char data anytime data that you're storing is always going to be the same. States, 2 characters. Zip codes, 5 characters or 9 characters, that sort of thing. And you want to use varchar when the data length has a wide variation. Those are general guidelines. You can go out and read on this and dig on it if you would like, but you can follow these guidelines and you're going to be fine. There's not a whole lot of complexity here. Just understand the 2 types and you'll usually know intuitively what you need to do.